Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to go over assigning Arnold materials once again, lighting in Arnold, and Arnold rendering. So again, I'll just start with a few objects I know don't have anything. I'm going to go to assign new material on my um, bookshelf here because I know later I will be adding textures to it. I'm going to go to Arnold and I'm going to do AI standard surface. Now in here, I'm going to right click, I'm going to AI standard surface. It's going to say AI standard surface 3, and I'm going to type in bookshelf material. Now from here, I'm not going to add anything or change anything on it. Totally fine the way it is because I don't have a texture to add to it because I'm not going to be too concerned about it. Again, with this one, I'm going to also assign new material. It's going to be an Arnold shader. I'm going to go to AI standard surface, and this is going to be called sword material. I'm also going to click on my shield. If I right click on it, you'll see I have a bunch of stuff in here. I just want to show you again really quickly, edit, delete all by type, and history. This is really good to do right after you've imported a bunch of objects, and that's because you just won't have as much information in there that you might have had before. So just a quick little tip. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a new material to this. I'm going to hold right click, assign new material, and I'm going to do AI shader, AI standard surface. And this one I'm going to actually start to apply the materials because I already have it. I'm going to do file. This will be shield diffuse texture file, and I'll locate the name or the file, and I believe I had it over here and here, and not that. Here we go. Open, and then I'm going to do the same thing for all of these. I thought I labeled this. Oh, maybe not this one. Shield material. And I have the color assigned. I'm going to go over here to specular. I'm going to click on there, go to file. I'm going to click on locate the file, and shield specular, this one. Click open, and shield specular texture file. And now I'm going to go to geometry, and I'm going to add a bump mapping. Under bump mapping, I'm going to go to file, and I'm going to use as tangent space normals, and then I'm going to go on file 1, and I'm going to name this shield normal texture file, and I'm going to click on image name and shield normal 002 and click open. And now I've got my shield on here. Getting some depth out of that. I wish I had a little bit more depth in the crevices here, but that's okay. And now I need to do the same for my barrel. I'm going to hold right click, assign new material, and the reason I'm doing this, AI standard surface, the reason I'm doing this is because barrel material is because the Arnold renderer will not be able to read materials correctly if it's not an Arnold shader. So just an FYI, if you're trying to use a Blinn or a Lambert or anything like that, it's not going to work right when rendering in Arnold. And by default, the only I guess good renderer that Maya has that can render normal maps and specular maps and things like that, and you know, smooth objects, you know, high division objects, high subdivision, would be Arnold, and the lighting's fantastic. It's a professional. Click on file, and barrel diffuse texture file. And under image name, I need to locate the barrel now, and I believe that's under weak. I have this one, but I don't believe that's it. Barrel diffuse.tga. Yep. Click open. And now I have to do the crate. Okay. Assign new material. Arnold, AI standard surface. And we're going to do base color. File. We're going to locate the crate. Perfect. And this will be crate diffuse texture file. Okay. I'll show you later why I named the texture files. It's not absolutely mandatory, but I think you'll see why later if I can get to it in this video. Now, now that I've got all of my materials, I'll have a AI standard surface. So you'll see AI standard surface. Just double check on every object you have in the scene that it says AI standard surface. I also like to name my materials. It makes it much easier to find. AI standard surface, AI standard surface, AI standard surface, and AI standard surface. Okay, so now I've double checked all of my objects in my scene. I want to show you one last quick little trick before I get into lighting and rendering, excuse me. For you gamers out there, typically you would just have this to be a larger object. But on the fly, for something like this, if you need a little bit extra space with your scene, you can just duplicate, Control D, and drag these over, and you'll get a little bit more room because they are tileable. Now if I set the pivot point holding D and V to be at the edge, now I release D and V and I just hold V, I'll snap it right here, and you'll notice that it tiles very cleanly, very nicely, and I have a tileable texture. I can do the same thing with this one. Hold Control and D for duplicate. I can hold D and V to make this perfectly align, and then hold V right here to snap it over here, and you'll see again, I believe this one's a tileable texture. Yep. And now you'll see that I've just given myself a little bit extra room, and I just did it really quickly. So now when I render this scene, I'll probably do it from like an angle like this, and I'll try to make sure that I don't have anything else in the scene sort of that's empty. You know what I mean? So with that being said, I'm going to continue on with lighting and rendering. So I've got all of my objects in the scene imported. I've got all standard surface materials on it, Arnold standard surface materials on it. And now I need to go ahead and I need to create Arnold Lights before this will render. Because if I just go ahead and try to render, let me show you what happens. If I just tap 7 on the keyboard, you'll see everything's black. And that's because there's no lighting in the scene. This is just a default lighting scheme that Maya has created. And it's not really lit in when it comes to rendering. It's just something that it allows you to see when you're modeling. So I'm going to go to Arnold. I'm going to go to Lights. And I'm going to show you a bunch of these different lights. There's the area light. And you'll see whichever direction this is pointing in will create a light. And you can use the channel box to -90. Rotate this around, or excuse me, to rotate this around. Now that I have a light in here, I want to show you what's going to happen. I'm going to tap 7 on the keyboard. You still don't see anything until when I bring it down. You see how faint that is? You can barely see it. So in our attribute editor, we're going to need to go over here and under intensity, we're going to have to bring this higher. So I just brought it up to like a 10. So I have some strange, that's just reflecting the light off of it because I haven't changed any of the properties on it yet. So I just wanted to show you by tapping 6 on your keyboard is default with, or shaded with texture on. 7 is shaded with texture and lighting. So I'm going to go ahead and just point these around. And if you notice, if I rotate the camera, whichever way this little line is pointing, that's which way the light will be pointing also. So just a heads up, and let's see if I scale it. If I scale it, it doesn't really, it does make a subtle difference. It's not as sharp, but not too much. You can play around with exposure. So now it's a much brighter light, right? You can change the spread. It's at 100%. That's sort of like the range of it. Soft edge, you can change that. I think that'll increase render time quite a bit, though. And the more you mess around with different attributes on lighting and materials and stuff, the more complicated your scene will become. So, or the longer it'll also take to render. So that's one light. This is the area light. So I'm just going to leave that in the scene for now. And I'm going to leave it closer to the ground because I'll be able to notice it better that way. Now if I go to Arnold and Lights, I have the Sky Dome light. So I guess I'll just show you in order. If I click the Sky Dome light, you'll notice that this entire scene lights up. So no matter 6 or 7, the entire thing's lit up. So the Sky Dome light is just like this bright light that circles all the way around, and it kind of lights everything basically 100% evenly in a 360-degree radius around our object. So that one's useful, but for this I'm going to turn it, I'm just going to delete it for now so we can focus on some of these other lights. Now I'm going to go into Arnold Lights and we're going to go to Mesh Light. Now it's not going to allow me to do anything, but if I select one of my meshes, Arnold Lights Mesh Light, you'll see it now does something, but it's really not, I really don't see too much unless you have like an object like an actual light bulb lit or something. And I'm going to undo that, pressing Control Z. So you can see where it could be useful, but we're not going to use it for this purpose here. Now I'm going to go to Arnold Lights and let's try the photometric light. Now I've got this photometric light, and I'm going to bring this up, and you'll see how subtle that light is. So I'm going to bring up the intensity, and now you'll see that I get, and it's going to point in the arrow, the direction of the arrow. Okay? And you'll see how that works. Alright. So that one's pretty neat and useful. I'll leave that there. And then we'll go to Arnold Lights and Light Portal. Okay. So I'm going to skip over that because I'm not going to go over the sky. We're not going to get more detail in the Sky Dome light. Arnold Lights. And then there's also the physical sky. And the physical sky is kind of cool, but you can only see it when it's actually rendered because it actually renders like an actual physical sky. If you see over here, if you just take a look. So it's kind of neat in that aspect. And then you can bring up the intensity, obviously, make it a brighter day. You see over here. And then obviously you can make it a darker day. So that's sort of, you know, night to day. Day and night. Anyway, so I'm going to not use that one either at the moment. And that's just sort of creating this this sky around. So like a dome, it's going to be inside. But I don't need to worry that I'm not doing an outside scene. I don't even have any windows in this, which would be a really neat thing, but I don't really need it right now. So I'm going to stick with these two lights. I just wanted to cover what the other lights are. Now in here, I've got my light scenes, and I want to cover basic 3-point lighting setup, and I'm going to just I have them displayed in the bottom in our canvas here. Here's the good one, and I guess I'll just drag this over and just show you really quickly. So I'm going to zoom in here just so we can see it. Hopefully, there we go. That's a little bit better. So in this image here, you'll notice we have 3 different lights. We have our backlight, and this is sort of to give, if you notice this little highlight on the head, this is to give what is called a rim light. And you'll see just a subtle rim of light around, like in a character scene where characters in a scene. You'll notice that there's just a little hint of light going around the silhouette of them. We also have our key light. This is uh, our main light that lights us, and you'll see even on this gradient here how it's lighting the one side, and this is sort of how we get an as sort of intricate basic lighting scheme as possible, and it's super useful, and it's used in like everything. And then we also, and there's obviously more advanced stuff, but this is a pretty good basic learning principle here. And then we also have our fill light, where typically the fill light can be changed in color. It's typically 50 to 75%. The range varies on that. You know, it depends on the scene you're trying to light, but just call it 50%, give or take, of intensity of your key light on your fill light. And you usually can, depending on the scene, you can even add like sort of these filters onto the light. And this is in a real life scenario, but it transfers over into 3D the same exact way. And you can use these little filters to change the color on the light. So I'll just give you one example. A standard lighting scene where you would use a color on our fill light would be like a night scene, in where it's really dark and there's lots of shadows and stuff, but you want to convey that it's a dark scene. So what a lot of people will do, and a lot of film makers will do, is they'll add a blue filter over the fill light, and this way it will look more like it's night. And I think I do have an example here. And I'll open it up in Photoshop. So I've got an example here where the scene has the fill light at a sort of blue filter over it to give it this night sort of feel to it, like he's got the lights out. But you know, cameras can't work without lights, so this is sort of how they create that illusion that there's no light in the scene, by adding a blue filter on there and still lighting the scene. And also there's probably some color correction and things like that, which we can do also using Photoshop and things like that. Anyway, enough said on that. Let's get into our lighting scheme now. So when getting into the lighting in Maya here, we're going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to use this light here. I'm going to see if I can bring it up even stronger. I can. Perfect. So I'm going to make this like my key light. And I'm going to need a lot of lights in the scene to sort of make it how I'd like it to look. I meant to make it 100. And maybe even 1,000. Give that a shot, and I'll bring it off the wall a little bit. So I'm just going to create this as sort of a generic light in my scene, and I'm going to also create my 3-point lighting scheme. I really only need my 3-point lighting scheme, but I thought this might be fun to play around with. So my key light, I'm going to light the sword primarily, or the shield primarily. I'm just going to use that as my main subject here. And this is going to need to be... So this is going to need to be my key light. And I guess what I'll do is I'll also even make it a sort of a and that'll work. Now it's going to be difficult for me to create the rim light in here, so or the backlight, because it's so far in the back. So with that, I'm still going to be able to do it. And I'm not going to get into it yet, but there's ways to like have lights go through walls and not affect anything, but in this case I'd only want the shield to be affected, so I could totally do that. But it's a little bit more complicated, and we'll just stick to the basics. So I'll do another not sky dome, not photometric, and this one's going to be my backlight, and I'm going to just try to get that rim feel to it that I wanted. If it's possible, I have all these objects in the way. Um, and maybe more so like this. And you see how I have it pointing right at it. So I'm going to see if I can play it with the intensity and bring it up a little bit. And your backlight's going to have a low intensity. So I have my key light at like I can even name the lights too. So key light, and I'll name this one backlight. So on my key light, I have it at 200, and this needs to be a much lower sort of whatchamacallit, intensity. Let's see what happens if I delete that for now, because I'm really only going to be focusing on this. So or if I do keep that light in here, and I do want it to sort of blend. I'll play around with this one in a second. I don't need it necessarily. And then this one, maybe, I don't know. Let's try, just see what happens with that. And then I also need a fill light, so I'm going to do Arnold Lights. I'll do another photometric. And then this one will come over here, over here. And just for fun, I'm going to change the color to blue. And I'm going to bring up my intensity. Oh, it didn't select my color. There we go. And let's bring that over just a little bit. And you'll see, like, over here in the color, so where this would be totally dark, now it's got sort of that blue tint to it. And maybe if I make it, it's about 50%, so this will be about 100. And just to show you, and this one I really wanted to get a rim light on, but I don't know if it's going to happen. But I'm going to try my best to get it. And maybe I just need to bring up the intensity to like 50. And you can always double check your example if you'd like. So it's supposed to be sort of like this, 45-degree angle to camera. So what I'm going to do here is my camera will probably go something like right here, and I will render it from approximately this area here. And if I want this to show a little bit more on the box, I'll bring it back a little bit, and you'll see I get a little bit more of that shadow on the box. So anyway, now that I've sort of got this lighting in here, and I like keeping this in here at a little bit, bringing it up a little bit, maybe, ooh, 10,000, maybe 1,000, 1250. Alright, that's good enough. So, anyway, and I can always bring this one back too. And you see how that lighting sort of really helps in the live scene. And now, one last trick to keep in mind is, now that I've got my scene up to this point, I'm going to go into my view, and I'm going to go to my camera settings, and I'm going to go to resolution gate. And now what this resolution gate does is it allows me to frame my scene. So it basically allows me to set my camera. So I can sort of, set this however I'd like it to look. And I can bring it out a little bit. But I'm going to keep it at a point where I think it's kind of neat and just some kind of intricate sort of uh, composition. So my composition, and I don't know, whatever, something like this. This will be totally fine. It's always so hard to play around and choose a different sort of composition because you have infinite possibilities at 360 degrees, rotatable camera. So just sort of pick one that you're kind of cool with, and then we're gonna go into rendering. So now that I'm up to this point, I'm going to go under rendering. I'm going to go to render, and I'm going to go to render settings. And in here, I'm not going to change too much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my renderable camera as perspective. Now your presets, I would just leave this as like HD 540. That's totally fine. You can set it to be larger. I would just stick with the HDs. Those are 16:9 aspect ratios, which basically means widescreen. You could try 720 or 1080. I'm just going to stick with sort of this flat in the middle, so 1280 by 720. But the other one is totally fine. You can leave this on. It's not going to make a difference. And then all this other stuff, because we're only rendering one frame, won't matter. But we cover how to, when we render out a little animation later in the semester, we'll cover more of these attributes in the render settings. We can check under the Arnold render tab, but basically you want to keep this low, so we're not even going to touch anything in here. Adaptive sampling, these things just jump up rendering time, and unless you really start fiddling around with this stuff, it's not gonna visually, it's not gonna make too much sense even until you really dive into it. Motion blur and these things can add so much render time by playing around with these settings. So just because we're just learning, leave everything as default. Just renderable camera perspective. You can turn off the alpha mask if you'd like. It's totally fine, but I have nothing that I need to alpha in this. And then I have my preset HD 720, and that'll be an aspect ratio of 1280 by 720. And that's all I really need for this. I'm going to click close. And now you can always double check your perspective here, and this is basically what I'm only going to see what's in here. In the light gray, I'm not going to see any of that. So now that I've got that all set, I can do Arnold and render, and this is really the true sort of look and feel of how this will turn out. And there it goes. I was like, what happened? So now you're going to see this start to render. It's going to really highlight some of these lighting things. I need to up the intensity on the blue light in here. It's not reading well in the scene, so that needs to come up a lot. But I mean, other than that, you kind of get the idea, and by playing around with these settings, you can get some really cool intricate looks to it. So I'm not looking for anything too detailed. You can see the little percentage also, by the way, in the bottom right hand corner. So this is at 43%. So it's just going to take an extra minute. If yours might take a little bit longer, I'm not sure. And that's really all I'm looking for this particular assignment. I guess I can explain a couple more things while it's rendering. In here, where you see, in yours it might be different, but you see these little specks of white. That's basically reflectivity happening. If we play around with the settings and change our specular map and things like that, that will change. And now my scene is rendered, and all these little crevices and bumps, that's due to the lighting. Um, but you can see so far, I don't have a normal map on my crate. I don't have a normal map on my barrel. I do on here on my shield, and I don't have any textures yet on the sword or the bookshelf, but once I include those, it's going to have a really neat little look to it. So that's how you go ahead and render a image, light it as well. And then I'm going to go into File, and I'm going to do Save Image. And now you can go ahead and locate where you want to save it to. It's just too big there, so now I'm going to go to, you can just save this out. And I'll show you once I find my folder I'm going to save to. So in here, maybe I can make this a little bit smaller. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and save this as render test. You can name it whatever, and it'll save out as whatever you'd like. And if just by chance, just save it out as a JPEG and click Save. And there you go. And now you should have your image saved. You could also take a screenshot of this, but you're not going to get the same exact quality. However, that's another way for your submission if you'd like. Anyway, that being said, I think I've covered everything I need to cover in this. We covered lighting, importing objects, adding Arnold materials to every object, creating a fill light, key light, backlight, and render. So yeah, I've touched base on everything here. Oh, my sword is floating right here. I didn't even notice. So this is basically the start of your midterm. If you didn't already kind of look forward and look at your midterm, this is the start of it. So we create the scene, we import the objects, we make sure every object is textured, and go ahead and check the additional requirements on there because it's coming up extremely soon. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you have any questions, shoot me a message right away. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.